Hello and welcome to everyone tuning in from all around the world. Quick note, just to hear the program in Spanish, please select the globe icon down on your toolbar below called Interpretation and select Spanish or English to your preference. My name is Erin Bromagem, and I am proud to be a part of the International Affairs team in the office of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, and equally proud to be here today representing Los Angeles as a member of the City Hub and Network for Gender Equality, or Change. I am honored to be here as today's moderator for an excellent event alongside the annual high-level political forum on sustainable development. Our program today focuses on how cities are working together to advance gender equity. We have experts from across the Western Hemisphere to share more with you. And I would like to take a moment to thank all of you for joining us and thank my colleagues in Change, my sisters and brothers working to change the world for the better, starting with what local governments can do. And if you were lucky enough to join yesterday's Local and Regional Governments Forum, you know local governments can do a lot. So I want to take a moment to thank Change's Voluntary Gender Review Working Group, the team who led development of the report prepared today's event, including Change's chair, the City of Mexico City. I'd like to thank our patient and brilliant graphic designer, Jessie V. Castillo. And I would like to take a moment to recognize the tireless efforts of the Change Secretariat, led by the amazing Holly Milburn-Smith, with support from Maya Deshpande, as well as our funders, including the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Open Society Foundations, and Splendid Media, as well as our partners at the Mayor's Fund for Los Angeles. In just a moment, you will hear from Change's chair, represented today by Dr. Diana Alarcón Gonzalez of Mexico City, who will introduce our newest report, the 2022 Voluntary Gender Review, a first of its kind progress report from 8 cities, 8 global cities, talking about the action that we've taken to advance the Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly SDG number 5, achieving gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. So SDG 5 is one of the goals that's within scope for HLPF this year. And Change saw this as an opportunity to try something different, something that might encourage others to continue to innovate in how we approach the connectedness and the intersectionality that's inherent in the SDGs, and how we embrace the importance and demonstrate the importance of partnerships in SDG 17. HLPF's theme this year is building back better from COVID, but it is my belief that we cannot hope to build back at all, let alone build back better, without equity, and specifically gender equity. It is my hope that as we explore the ways to build back with equity, we learn from one another through this common language of the Sustainable Development Goals, so that we also build back with trust and with co-ownership, with new ideas, and with a shared sense of what it means to leave no one behind. So let me share with you a bit about Change and what we're going to discuss today. The City Hub and Network for Gender Equity was founded in 2020 by 6 cities who shared the same belief, that by working together, we can achieve far more than any of us alone. And our vision is gender equality within this generation. In less than 2 years, Change has grown to include 8 cities from across 5 continents, and together we collectively represent more than 57 million residents. And today, on behalf of the Change Network, I'm delighted to announce our newest member, the City of Bogota, Colombia, led by Mayor Claudia Lopez Hernandez. And we're excited to learn from the work of this great city, the work that they have done to build innovative city-level care and a care system throughout their communities. You can read about all of this and more in our Voluntary Gender Review later today. So before I pass the floor, let me just share with you a bit about today's program. We'll hear first from Diana Alarcón. We'll hear from another Change member, Mariana Calcaño, who joins us today from the city of Buenos Aires, to share how the Voluntary Gender Review came together and how Buenos Aires is integrating gender across its operations. And next, we'll be hopefully joined by Fabiana Goyeneche, who will share her work from the city of Montevideo in Uruguay. And finally, from the Hunger Project in Mexico, from Diana Delgado, who will discuss the importance of dialogue and multi-stakeholder partnerships to achieve sustainable development and the SDGs. So thank you again for being with us today. We're so excited to share all of this with you. Let me turn now to Diana Alarcón González. Doctora, bienvenidos.
Thank you very much to all the people who participate in this session today. For Mexico City, it has been an honor to coordinate the work of the network during this year of 2022. Thanks to the invitation we received from the Mayor of the Angels for the head of government of Mexico City, and with the support of all the cities that integrate this network. We welcome the recent addition of Bogota, which will surely contribute to strengthening our work and demonstrates the relevance of this technical and political partnership on the gender in the world in which we live. During the first semester, we have worked in the elaboration of this voluntary gender review, VGR, that we present today, in which the 8 cities that are part of the network, Barcelona, Bogota, Buenos Aires, Freetown, London, the Angels, Mexico City, and Tokyo, have contributed as I comment. This is an unprecedented exercise. This is the first time that local governments are reporting on the progress of our public policies and our action towards the fulfillment of SDG 5, that is toward achieving gender equality and empowering of all women and girls. For that reason, we would like to thank the 8 cities and those who made up the networking work group that structured this document, Buenos Aires, the Angels, and Mexico City. Thanks to Metropolis, too, for generating synergies and for jointly promotion this launch event for the BGR. We know that from Metropolis, important efforts have been to build indicators with the gender focus and to promote decision-making based on evidence and statistical information. We also thanks to Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for the backing on the work that changed doesn't for contribution with the foundation for the preparation of this review. The data statistical information with a generous focus is a great help to governments to designing better intervention strategies to close the gaps that persist today, gender gaps. Local governments and civil society organizations are recognizing the needs of great transparency and accurate measure of the gender disparate, especially about condition of women and girls. And we hope that this documentality contributed to this great goal. When we consider the realization of this report, we did so with several adversities in mid firstly to share experience, including the change and the success we have had as cities to demonstrate how local governments can take action to accelerate the progress toward SDGs 5. Secondly, we want to promote and validate the work on the gender equality in the cities of the network to strengthen support of the interview are taken today and moving forward. We want truly to position change within K international network and generate alliance to have a gender collective to impact. And fourthly, and very important, we want to demonstrate responsibility and transparency as members of this network. This report is structured based on the indications that we have worked on change and that we have grouped into 4 categories and very important uses for women: physical autonomy, second, economic opportunities, thirdly, all uses related to local governance, and finally, the environment or public space that gender equality politics have. This report is divided to 7 parts: an introduction where we describe the reason we're doing this review and this new generation of voluntary reports, a reflection on the importance of measuring inequalities, gender disparities, and description of the indicators we are using as a concrete example of what is useful in our cities. A study prepared from the Alliance with university partners, a note for the citizens, a section on the conclusion, and the appendix with the all variety of indications that will elaborate from change.
One of the main challenges that define the politics of development in Mexico City is sustainability. That it is also a main pillar of the agenda. We are about to build an innovative city, and it is very clear for us that that is built through social equity and reducing the inequity gaps. For us, innovation means changing creativity and knowledge, the use of science, education, art, technology, and information to further improve the livelihoods of people from a perspective of inclusion and sustainability, and situating all of our people at the center, more specifically women, and not leaving anyone behind. This is why we are committed to change and the work that all the cities are doing in the framework of this alliance and this group. We believe that the compiling data and could be a challenge. This allows us to strengthen our public policies and provides us with more strength, indeed. We hope this document is inspiring to other cities and networks, and for this to be the first of many voluntary gender reviews. We invite you to talk about it, discuss it, and thank you so much again for being part of this conversation.
Well, thank you, Diana. Thank you so much for your words. I'm going to turn now to Mariana Calcaño, who is General Director of Institutional Articulation at the Secretariat for Gender Equality in the city of Buenos Aires. Welcome, Mariana.
Muchas gracias, Erin. ¿Me escuchan bien?
Thank you so much, Erin. Can you hear me? Yes, perfect. Well, thank you so much to everybody for having invited all of us to be part of this important network. Buenos Aires has been working on gender equality for over 35 years, but it's only been recently that we have created the department that has been dedicated to policies of gender equality within the city government, as well as in conjunction with external actors. We have, as Erin mentioned, a great responsibility and a great opportunity as cities, as local governments, to operate transformative actions within our areas and for our neighbors. We are very close to the people and we can transform their lives, and we want to do so in an equitable manner, right? To keep that in mind, we need to make sure that we share in this goal, and this is the reason why we're coming together in this network, and that's why we understand that it is only within a network that we can truly learn from each other and advance those policies to reduce gender inequality. And we know that this has been difficult throughout the history of our government to prioritize. From Buenos Aires, we have a strategy that has 3 premises. First, to design strategies and policies that focuses women at the center and as key in the development and the growth of our cities. As Diana mentioned, we should not leave anybody behind, and we have a lot of value to contribute to our cities. Secondly, we have an imagined city strategy that's been designed from the right perspective and understanding the economy as an important focus for the development of women. We use the theoretical framework of the Latin American economy, as well as the women autonomy, as well as the development of the development at an economic level, because we believe that women can contribute and make advances to grow and have access to decision making so that we can strengthen their autonomy. And lastly, as we had mentioned before, we want to design a strategy that can be transversal to the entire government. We do not implement public policies that are direct for our neighbors, but what we do is we monitor and we accompany the rest of the government function so that they can rethink their policies from a gender perspective and to use it in a real way that can provide real opportunities. Diana also mentioned something very important, which is the evidence, which are the information. This is something that we believe. If we cannot measure it, we cannot improve it. So from Buenos Aires, we think it is very important to develop, and indeed we have developed in 2018 a system of gender indicators that allow us to understand what are our inequalities within each of our sectors so that we can help the different departments to develop policies that can reduce those gaps that the evidence is showing. So we want to have policies based and supported on data. This year and from now on, our agenda is going to be divided in 3 main axes: work or jobs, care, and that is why we really are happy to have Bogota in this network, because they're being a pioneer in the system of care and of violence, because it is through addressing these issues that we need to, if we are not able to live a life without violence, we cannot develop the lives of women. So how are we going to do all of this? We do so with different external actors in the private organizations, entities, social society, with international organizations, as well as other agencies in the government. So this is why it's very important to be part of this network, to work with Metropolis, who is also one of our hosts today, and to work with small industries as well as big private companies in Buenos Aires, so that each person from the perspective and each institution can help us to develop this agenda that we have in mind, because this is one of the biggest premises that we have from the government of Buenos Aires. So not only can we not improve what we cannot measure, but we're never going to be able to create substantial transformation in our cities if we don't do so, and if we don't think we can do so from the government point of view. So we have to be joined by the private sector, by civil society, so that all of us can collaborate in the reduction of these inequalities. I would also like to emphasize the work that has been created for the development of this voluntary gender review, which is extremely important. Honestly, it has been an enriching experience for all of us, because it's allowed us to see where we were at so that we could work with other cities, and to also see what were those case studies, those policies, specific policies that we would like to learn from. And so I would like to especially give a thanks to Mariana Camisa from the government of the local government, who were key in the development of this scheme. She is in charge in Buenos Aires of collecting the information so that they can create the CRLR in Buenos Aires. So she was a key person in this project in conjunction with the City of Mexico. And she has also helped us to find a way to think of these case studies through several questions that helped us to organize ourselves. So we selected as a case study an initiative that we have called Initiative for the Gender Equity Public and Private. It was developed together with the private sector. We work with companies that wanted to join this initiative. So what we do is that we work around 4 strategies with 8 commitments. So these companies joined our initiatives, and together we co-created an action plan in order to reduce the inequalities. So for us, it's really been a very enriching experience with the private sector. All of the years, we renew this commitment with these companies, and we work, for example, in issues related to the job market, access to the job market. We are also working with a consultant who measures the salary gap with the companies as part of this initiative. I don't want to steal more of your time. We invite you to read this document, which has been incredibly innovative. We have just been truly happy to be part of this network and of this document. And we make ourselves available to continue working if you would like to learn more about this initiative. We are here. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Mariana. I'm delighted to learn more and engage with all of the great work that Buenos Aires has been doing for years and years. I want to turn now to Fabiana Goyeneche. Fabiana is the Director of International Relations for the municipality of Montevideo. She was previously the Director of the Department of Social Development for Montevideo and has worked a lot on public policies around sexual diversity and gender and ethno-racial perspectives. So we'll turn now to Fabiana. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Erin, and good morning to everybody. It is a pleasure to be part of this space. Anything that can encourage the cities to work on policies that are focused on gender at a local level. It is extremely important. And since we also have to have this meeting, not by just happenstance within the political framework, we are talking about the sustainable development goals number 5. I think it's important to emphasize today gender equality, that in order to reach any of those goals, the governments at a national level are extremely important. We will not be able to reach these goals, these development goals, if local governments are not actively participating with commitment in a multi-level dialogue with the rest of the state and the community in an alliance. So it is extremely important to have these types of meetings where we exchange and share experiences. Montevideo has a long history of working with equality policies. More than 30 years ago, it started to, at the same time that Beijing's conference was being prepared, Montevideo started to work first on generating public policies focused on gender equality and women's rights. It was throughout the years that that commission became the Department of the Women, and that department became a department for gender equality. And not only did we create a budget, but we also created an organization that was going to be working along different parts of the government. This department is not just looking to develop public policies focused and specifically on the rights of women and girls, but also to look to ask each area of the local and municipal governments to have that focus, that gender focus, and to analyze in each design, that monitoring and creation of policies, how are women affected? Why are women being part? Or why are women not being part of these policies? How can we empower them? How can we contribute in order to close that gap? Which today we say we still need 135 years to reach that gap. So we've had a long trajectory in that great process, which we have been deepening, for example, in each plan, in the last commitments that we made and that were advanced, to have a budget with a focus on gender, because we know that it's not important just for public policies, but they also have to have a support with a budget. And we can thus see at this point that we have the true commitment on gender equality. So we've been making advances on all of these budgets, and we are able to see exactly the budget of each department within the local government are showing their commitment to promote these gender focused policies. So today, Montevideo has just finished their second voluntary general review. We've been working since 2018 in our commitment to carry out these goals, and we have tried to do so in different areas in order to push forth the 2030 agenda. And we're trying to identify the development of not only the reports, but also the development of new policies, and to identify from all of the goals that are proposed, how and where can the local governments can contribute, and where do they need to continue to work even more. So we found a lot of really interesting work. For example, in this first report that we found, I would like to share a little bit, for example, that speaking specifically on the report regarding this report, we identified which goals are being contributed to, in which goals, as they are being shared, are the governments contributing, and which goals are not being contributed to. Of course, there were some goals where we saw a lot of contributions from part of the local government. For example, the goals related to number 11, but we also found the goals on water and sanitation is the only goal where Montevideo has 100% commitment. But in terms of gender equality, we found that the local government are contributing a 78%. So that's a lot of commitment. We know that we are still in need of advancement in these goals, and throughout this period, during this administration, we have had an innovative emphasis, especially because this administration had to deal with the pandemic, and it had to take on a specific priority as a response, an emergency response due to the pandemic. There are 5 axes for this plan. One of them is the equality axis, and it looks to deepen the gender policies for women and girls, the promotion of health of women and girls. And so we're trying to deepen further into these policies, not only in the emergency plans, in the policies for emergencies. We have transformed all of these things because we have seen that there are policies that cannot just be a response only for emergencies, but now we have to focus on the conditions that have remained with the city after the pandemic. So this contribution towards these goals number 5, have to be a priority. So we ask ourselves, what are the next steps that we can take? And how can the local governments, the state governments contribute to this agenda for the year 2030? I think that that big commitment will be to articulate and to dialogue around the policies that are much more universal. And in that sense, understand that sometimes it is necessary to develop policies focused on women and girls, but we are still struggling to really apply the gender focus throughout the entire government. It is a challenge. For example, we need to learn how environmental issues, mobility issues can really take on and can really understand that it is important to look and analyze from a gender perspective. What can we do for women? What are we still needing to work on? How can we apply what we've learned? And if we do this, we'll see that we have a lot of things to contribute to. There's a lot that we still need to do. And as like we mentioned, we're also sharing a lot of commitment with several of the other cities. For example, Bogota, that has already been mentioned. To us, this is very important to have this point of reference. And us here at Montevideo have a national plan. And now we have to learn how to develop it from a more local perspective. And now we see that we can't just wait for those policies to be issued from the national perspective, but it has to be from a local perspective. I think it's extremely important to understand that cities are the places where we see the biggest gaps, because these are Latin American metropolis. We are in a continent that is extremely urbanized, and we know that maybe for 2030, it'll be even more so. So we have a space, a public space, where these inequalities and the conflicts are going to be found. However, we have the opportunity to transform these spaces as spaces of equality in its most ample sense of the word, public spaces. Any space where we are. We need to also realize that it's not just the public space, it's not just the public or the community that has this responsibility, but it's also the private sectors, the local government sectors, and they have the responsibility to help out women and girls, because we know that all of this has to be important to the public life, not only today where we're in a process of transformation. The public policies need to show this commitment to break away from these inequalities and break all of these barriers, and to accompany women and girls in this goal for equality, and hopefully those 135 years that we need in order to reduce this gap in gender, we can hopefully shorten those years thanks to the cities and the metropolis that are here today in this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fabiana. It was wonderful to hear those reflections. I want to turn now to our final panelist. Diana Delgado is the Research and Strategic Knowledge Manager at the Hunger Project Mexico, and she participates in the Mexican chapter of the Movement for Gender-Focused Community-Led Development, which I find just fascinating, and I can't wait to hear more. Diana, let me turn to you.
Thank you, Erin. Buenos días a todas y todos. Muchas gracias por la invitación.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation for this important event. And also, thank you for giving us the opportunity for sharing our part, and particularly in this space, with the experience that is so innovative and from which we will learn a lot with all these collaboration processes that we are presenting today. I work at the Hunger Project. We are an international organization, and from there we believe in, we act in international agendas. And I am convinced they are not possible if we do not do it from a multi-sector perspective. I would like to start from there. We are getting involved in international development agendas, and from this multi-sector. So giving more context for sustainable development, we need to focus in issues that come from structural inequities, and we need to be able to collaborate from the different areas and the different sectors that are present in the territory. And to start, I would like to do a disclaimer in the case of the work of THP, because we want to reach indigenous and rural Mexico, and we believe that the development occurs at the local level, and we do it with based and so now we know that the nature of this forum, the experiences that people are sharing, but we also do this, and we believe that any community, if it's urban, rural, if they do not, if the conditions for the rights of everyone to be respected, then reaching an international agenda like the 2030 agenda, then we cannot really achieve that. And precisely, we are focusing and creating favorable environments. And that is why, in the case of Mexico, we have been involved in this kind of agenda, the agenda at 2030. And we also have a special focus in the creation of data. We are convinced, we believe that we should go to the anecdotal, to the evidence. And something that we mentioned and that is very present in this report. And we also need evidence to be able to facilitate making decisions that are centered in people, and that precisely should be based in those in the data, and to be able to measure what we want to improve. So what I wanted to share today is precisely that experience from the perspective of a social oriented organization, and from the premise that we are sharing that we should be able to participate in the social civic spaces, and that we are within those spaces and we should strengthen them, improve them, and also criticizing them. Why not? And the Hunger Project is part of this group. That in the case of Mexico, we are part of the 2030 Agenda Committee. Actually, we chaired the Wellness Committee, and the work within that committee is the one who has allowed us to get closer to this execution of the creation of these international agendas in national spaces. And I would like to share with you all our experience and our involvement in building the national report that Mexico presented last time, and that at the end I would like to connect that with the report that's being presented today. During the political forum, Mexico presented their third and last voluntary review, and it came after we created this group. And this committee is actually formed for different the parts that were called by the, and in the case of Mexico, so it was the different sectors, the private sector, academia, and Hunger Project, along with Equipo Pueblo. We were the two organizations that were part of this multi-sector committee, and we contributed with information for the creation of this national review. So we also put out an evaluation that were serving as a follow-up to the 2030 agenda. This document was providing some other data for the creation of that voluntary report. It also allowed us to create a report around what the country was reporting, and this meant that we also had some reports that would parallel to what the federal government is obligated to publish. So also part of the responsibility that we have to participate in these spaces to allow us to strengthen accountability, and also to be critical and to propose certain things in terms of what we're lacking when we talk about an agenda that is so important as the 2030 agenda, right? And this is where I would like to connect some of the topics that I am involved in, and also part of this is that the enforcement of the agenda from the federal sector that has been, and this is not just a criticism that should be taken lightly, but part of the experience of the organizations that actually responded to that, but also establishing these spaces of dialogue with the different parts that were involved in building and creating this report. And also now we have been able to further finding the areas that need to be strengthened into, having a working agenda. That's something that's very positive, thinking about what's being presented today, right? The gaps that are have been identified today, and the experiences that also are identified in the gender report, the gender review that we are presenting today, because it allows us precisely to see what's happening at the local level. And again, we are convinced that the development happens at the local level, and starting from the experiences that we are presenting today is that we are able to respond to those gaps that we identified at the international, the federal level in the case of Mexico, and that it allows us in any case to close those gaps that Fabiana was mentioning. And in 135 years, and it also allows us to compile this evidence that exists in several spaces and to be able to articulate that, because multi-sector, we have that broad vision where we are able to build that broad vision of what's happening in the territory. The Hunger Project, like I was saying, we work in the rural areas, but we also agree that there are the topics that we are able to be in international spaces. We are in spaces, in global spaces as well, but our work in the communities also facilitates, so we can take and bring information from the local to the international, but also from the international to the local. And for those realities, they're able to dialogue and be in conversation with one another. And this, just to close, I do not think that there is a correct way to reach governance if it's not involved in the global, following this fractal theory that needs to happen in every space, so we can see that in a concrete way. And that is why we direct our efforts in seeking building effective relationships with local governments, because they are the closest ones to people. So that is the first level of government that it is responsive to a lot of the population, but also at a state level and a national level, we are focusing in to have a say in building agendas, also with that multi-sector lens, because I am convinced that any other effort falls short, and then the size of the goals that we have, it does not allow for unilateral agendas. We need to honor all the sectors, and I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for the space.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thank you to all of our speakers. I want to encourage our audience to enter your questions into the chat function. We will be able to capture those and ask them in real time to our panelists. So please do enter any questions that you have. I'll also let you know the Voluntary Gender Review is available for download in English now, Spanish to come. It's available now at citieschange.org. Please visit the website, check us out. Please also follow us on Twitter at citieschange. We're going to move on now to some questions that we have already in, as well as please do, again, enter your questions into the chat. But I'm going to start going back to Diana Alarcón and ask you this question, because I think it's really, really relevant for both Mexico City as the chair of change, as well as all the work that you personally have done over the years in helping to craft the 2030 agenda for sustainable development and really get us to a place where we can talk about the SDGs in this common language. And I'd like to ask you, what do you think about the work that's been done so far? And what do you think are the most important next steps to get us to 2030 and to get us beyond 2030? Diana?
Thank you, Erin. This is a very important question, and we have given different responses to this. But to me, and I think that this is something we need to insist on, Agenda 2030, just as any global agenda, is about a vision of development. It's about the horizon where we want to go. Y ahora no sé por qué estoy hablando en inglés, así que me paso a español.
I actually don't know why I'm speaking in Spanish, so in English, I'm sorry, so I'm gonna go back to Spanish. So the 2030 agenda sets the objective of sustainability, right, in terms of the economic, the social, and the political. And it is that way that, you know, the 2030 agenda has been a great success. It has really contributed significantly to our conversations, to that vision of the future that we all want to build towards to. Today, any kind of discussion that circles around these topics, seeing the importance that sustainability holds in every dimension as the vision, the future vision that we wish to build. In that sense, the 2030 agenda as a starting point, the success of this agenda as a starting point, I believe to be unquestionable. The 2030 agenda, we have also learned that there is an interrelationship, an interconnectedness that is highly intimate, and it is present among all of the aspects of sustainable development, the environment, social, political, and in that way, every kind of, well, for example, gender equity. We need to make sure that we are walking along the same direction towards gender equity from every single perspective, from every single public policy that we are implementing in our cities. And I believe that a change, that is something that we have learned and we have recognized, that equity among men and women is only built, and if you want me to use a cliche word, we are building that through social justice for everyone. And these are just societies that allows us to advance towards gender equity. And that is why women's agenda, it is the agenda of our societies, the agenda of our cities. And there is where the importance of what we're doing lies, being able to build and for us to know how much we have advanced, all the challenges that we have, and we should be able to see that as a collective unit, as a vision, as a whole, as a package, a vision that we want to work towards to. And if you ask me, and of course, I am biased because I was part for so many years. I was part of this discussion. I believe that the 2030 agenda has contributed greatly to our conversation, more specifically, our conversation about the topics of gender, because it has set on the horizon the creation of sustainable cities.
Thank you, Diana. That's wonderful synopsis, and thank you so much for all the work that you've been leading for years on this effort and multiple different hats on. Diana Delgado, I want to turn to you and ask kind of the same question. What do you think are the most important steps ahead of 2030, and particularly with respect to SDG 5 and gender equality?
Gracias, Erin. Aquí creo que uno
Thank
de
you
los
so much, Erin. I think that one of the first steps I think that we will need to focus on are the implementation gaps. The 2030 agenda and other international spaces and conferences, we have a lot of tools in the case of Mexico, not only internationally, but internationally and nationally, where there are spaces where women are being, women's rights are being defined. So I think one of the very concrete steps to take, and that is in connection with the local government, is not only that, but also the sensibilization, the sensibility of the policies at a local level, and to be in close contact with the communities in order to implement these rights with a gender focus that must also be intercultural. We also need to strengthen within these rights framework, how are we going to be changing certain behaviors that we know happen? The difficulties that women face not only have to do with what we live in the community, societally, with family. So we need women to also understand themselves not only as citizens, as people who have rights, but also we need to understand how we're being understood by our communities, how we are seen by, for example, men, how they behave, how we are seen as women. So, for example, we see these structural violences where there are spaces where women cannot claim their rights because there are no cultural rights that allow them to claim these rights. For example, access to land, that I think is a space where we would need to work in order to reduce those implementation gaps, to question the behaviors that we currently have and how are you going to change those behaviors?
Thank you for that. I think it's excellent points all around. I want to turn to Mariana Calcaño now. Mariana, you spoke about how the city of Buenos Aires has this amazing strategy and years of experience in integrating gender equity into the work of the city throughout all of its sectors and levels. I'd be interested if you could share with us maybe some of the challenges or maybe issues you've encountered as you've implemented this strategy in Buenos Aires and how you were able to handle those challenges.
Yes. As Fabiana, I think, mentioned it, one of the most difficult things is to have all areas of government to think from a gender perspective and to then implement those policies as such. So a lot of times the problem is, what is it that they were understanding? And this is the reason why we also developed this strategy. Whenever we have women's or gender agendas started to become much more important and there was a social demand to really tackle these subjects, a lot of areas within the government started to think about projects and policies for women with a gender perspective. And that's how we started to see the multiplication of policies that were coming forward, but not all of them had a true gender perspective. So the first job that we had before really becoming a department for the gender equality is to first get organized. Let's think about a conceptual theoretical framework that we can pass to all of the government departments so that we can find a space and to start to identify. That's the reason why we started to talk about DECEPAL, because we thought that it was easier, maybe in a way, simple to explain to the government functionaries what types of policies they were thinking about and then how they could integrate those points from a gender perspective. It's a policy that, at least, are you making policies that operate with women in mind as decision makers, cross-sectional? So that's how we started to have a dialogue. We also accompanied our functionaries in the government to really flesh out this new way of thinking these policies. And at the same time, we also started with this creation of indicator systems. And in one way, we force certain areas to provide us with information. So within our system, we have sociodemographic information about the women in the city, but we also have information about the public policies that are being put forth. So the government departments have to send this information periodically, and that's how we're also able to involve them in this data collection process. And another thing that really strengthened this strategy is, for example, in the government, we have a model where we have a very strong planning strategy where we request from the different sectors to create a form where they ask, is this project having a gender impact? Yes or no? That information, we collect it, we do kind of like a double click with those projects that do say that they have an impact on gender. We analyze them and then we go back and say, if it's just for women, that doesn't mean that it has a gender perspective. But if you have a project where there are going to be women participating, there are women everywhere. So that's where we come in and we then go into more of a one-on-one work. It is a very hard, difficult work. We're talking about over 200 projects within 1 year. And then later, after you start to analyze it, we see that they don't really amount to those 200, but our job is to monitor this. And that's the reason why a lot of times whenever we're trying to articulate those points, is important because maybe there are two different sectors that are doing similar work, but if we put them together, we can complement that project together. But definitely the difficulty in this is to basically organize and to be involved in everything. So sometimes we maybe don't find out about certain projects or that we don't know anything about, or maybe we see that there are events where there are no women, for example, as speakers. So what we have to do is, what happened at this event? Was there no woman that could come and present, for example, on the subject of technology? That is in constant review, and that is our job. And I think that, and Fabiana, I think, mentioned this, but there is a subject on cultural transformation where we have to not only create, but we also have to accompany our governments. We're still learning. So we don't have to get upset, but we have to build along with the rest of our colleagues in the government in order to create that cultural transformation that is going to really help us to reduce those 135 years, which in addition, the pandemic, that was one of the things that the pandemic also worsened. So I hope that answered your question.
It certainly did. And I really thank you for that. I think what we've been talking about today is, gender equity as the result of and kind of the perpetuated by these complex systems in which we all operate. And so being able to identify some of these key points, as Change has attempted to do with this voluntary gender review, is to look at things like, how do we better capture data? How do we disaggregate that data? How do we tie it back to these qualitative programs that we are launching and running and implementing? And how do we build our own system of advocates and change agents in attempts to try to do away with some of these structures that continue to create inequities in how our systems operate and how our services are delivered? So I thank you all very much. I want to turn for our last question for the hammer. I want to turn to Fabiana and ask you, Fabiana, on behalf of Montevideo, on behalf of Metropolis, and all of the work that you lead, if there's one thing that you hope folks listening today can take away, what would that be? And what would you share with them as that summary?
I think that the biggest commitment, to call it so, for those of us who are part of this project, and those of us that are committed with gender equality, is to put on our purple color glasses in everything that we do, to think about equality every time we create something, we show and produce a public policy. If there's something that we've learned from the 2030 agenda, is that nothing is really able to be done from the top. We have to have participation of all of the people that are involved. All the women have to be involved, not only if we really want to reach true equality. So I think that's the one thing. to have the commitment to wear those purple colored glasses in order to meet those goals for the 2030 agenda.
Well, that is an excellent final thought, that we should all put on our purple colored glasses, look at gender throughout our systems, our cities, our communities, and find ways to look for equality wherever we can go. And that's really what we had hoped to do with our discussion today over the last hour, with the Voluntary Gender Review itself and with the City Hub and Network for Gender Equity. I invite you all to put your purple colored glasses on, take a look at the VGR, the first of its kind, at citieschange.org. Join the conversation, tweet at citieschange, and follow along for more to come from this powerhouse group of leaders at the local level looking to advance equity and achieve it within this generation. I thank you all for your time today. To my colleagues from Change and from Metropolis and Metropolis Women, thank you so much, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.